Welcome to this explainer. Okay, I want you to imagine standing out in the Aravalli Hills in Rajasthan. The sun dips completely below the horizon and instantly all the vibrant energy of the day vanishes into this eerie, pitch-black silence. You're standing right at the gates of Bhangarh Fort, and the darkness here, it is so thick that a flashlight barely even pierces it. We aren't just talking about your average ancient ruin today. This place is widely considered the absolute most haunted place in all of India.
And look, the warnings aren't just some cheap tourist gimmick to sell tickets. There's a literal official mandate placed by the Archaeological Survey of India that says entry strictly prohibited after sunset. Local legends insist that anyone who ignores that sign simply doesn't return. Take the truly chilling story of three friends who decided to sneak past the guards one night. In the crushing darkness, one of the boys slipped and fell down a dry well. While his friends were frantically rushing him to the hospital, their car crashed at a sharp turn, tragically killing all three of them. To the locals, that was just the fort claiming its price.
But this utter desolation is a massive contrast to the fort's magnificent past. Back when it was founded in 1573, Bhangarh was this thriving metropolis. We're talking over 9,000 houses, bustling markets, and a towering 7-story royal palace. Yet today, it's a complete ghost town. And if you visit, you'll notice something really bizarre. The walls of the buildings are perfectly intact, but almost none of the houses have roofs. It's like a giant puzzle. So how does a flourishing city face such utter, bizarre ruin?
Well, if you ask the locals, they'll tell you it's all because of two devastating curses. The first comes from a local ascetic, Baba Balu Nath. He supposedly swore the entire city would perish if the shadow of the royal palace ever touched his humble dwelling, a rule that an arrogant prince later totally ignored. The second curse, that one involves an evil dark magician who is dangerously obsessed with Princess Ratnavati. He tried to trick her with a black magic love potion, but she caught on and smashed it against the massive boulder. The cursed boulder ended up rolling over and crushing him, but with his dying breath, he condemned the entire city to absolute ruin.
And according to hundreds of terrifying accounts online, those cursed souls, they're still trapped there. Visitors swear they hear the agonizing cries of invisible women, the sound of glass bangles shattering in the dark, and ghostly dancing bells echoing through the ruins. Even professional Bollywood film crews have been totally spooked by completely unexplainable equipment and car failures. One terrified visitor even claimed a pitch-black cat emerged from the ruins and actively chased their car for over 100 kilometers. Literally 100 kilometers.
So all of this begs a really big question. Are any of these supernatural claims actually real? I mean, we've got a literal government warning, a history of real-life tragedy, and thousands of people reporting the exact same horrific experiences. It's honestly enough to make even the biggest skeptic think twice. But what happens if we turn the lights on? What happens if we drop the spooky campfire story tone, grab our magnifying glasses, and put Bhangarh Fort up against actual, rigorous, historical, and scientific scrutiny?
Let's start with the history. And here is a massive twist. There is absolutely zero verified historical proof that Princess Ratnavati, the Dark Magician, or even that ascetic ever existed. None. There are no stone inscriptions, no court records, nothing. The entire foundation of Bhangarh's infamous haunted reputation is pure, unadulterated folklore. The stories were just passed down from generation to generation, exaggerated year after year, until the myth completely and totally overshadowed reality.
Okay, let's dive into this next part. Because you might be thinking, but what about the physical experiences? The cold sweats, the shadowy figures people see? Well, back in 1980, a British engineer named Vic Tandy was working late by himself in a supposedly haunted lab. He felt this terrifying presence and actually saw a gray apparition out of the corner of his eye. But, being an engineer, he decided to investigate. He ended up finding a newly installed extractor fan that was emitting a sound wave at exactly 18.98 hertz. When he turned that fan off, the ghost vanished completely.
What Candy stumbled upon was the intense biological effect of something called infrasound. These are super low-frequency sound waves that humans simply cannot hear, but our bodies absolutely feel. And here's the crazy part. 18.98 hertz happens to be the precise resonant frequency of the human eyeball. When a sound wave hits you at that frequency, your eyes literally vibrate. This creates weird optical illusions, like gray shadows, while simultaneously triggering this primal sense of dread in your internal organs. Since Bhangarh Fort is basically a collection of hollowed-out stone structures sitting right in a high-risk earthquake and wind zone, it acts as a giant naturally occurring infrasound generator.
So we've essentially replaced restless spirits with physics, specifically infrasound and naturally fluctuating electromagnetic fields. To prove this, in 2012, the Indian Paranormal Society actually spent an entire night inside Bhangarh. They brought thermal cameras, EMF readers, the whole shebang. They even called out to the princess and the magician in the dark. Their grand conclusion? Zero paranormal activity. As their lead investigator plainly stated, you are not going to find ghosts in Bhangarh. You'll only find wildlife and physics.
But we can't ignore another massive factor at play here, your own brain. Specifically, the psychological concept of suggestibility. There is this fascinating haunt project done at Goldsmiths University in 2008. They put participants in an empty room and secretly pumped in EMF and infrasound. They told the participants the room was haunted, and sure enough, over 20% felt a ghostly presence. But here is the real kicker. Even when they turned the machines completely off, people still felt terrified. By the time you actually visit Bhangarh, the spooky warning signs and viral videos have already primed your brain to automatically manufacture fear.
And once you're in that hypervigilant, terrified state, your brain starts working in absolute overdrive to keep you safe through a phenomenon called pareidolia. This is a deep evolutionary survival mechanism. Think about it. Out in the wild, in the pitch dark, it is way safer for your brain to mistake a shadowy bush for a tiger than a tiger for a bush, right? Our brains are hardwired to desperately search for familiar human patterns. So put a highly suggestible person inside a ruined fort filled with jagged walls and deep shadows, and their brain will absolutely construct ghostly figures out of thin air.
A really perfect, relatable example of pareidolia in action is the famous 1976 Viking orbiter photograph of Mars. When that photo dropped, people absolutely panicked. They were convinced aliens had carved this giant human face into the surface of Mars. But years later, higher-resolution images proved it was literally just a random collection of hills and shadows. Our minds desperately want to invent supernatural explanations for perfectly natural shapes. And if we can do it with a pile of rocks on Mars, we can definitely do it in a dark fort in Rajasthan.
Now, what's really interesting about this is it leaves us with one lingering question. If there are absolutely no ghosts and the whole thing is just wind and psychology, why on earth does the government strictly ban nighttime entry? People point to that ASI sign as the ultimate proof of the paranormal, but the truth is actually much more grounded and, frankly, a whole lot more dangerous than any phantom.
The genuine threats here at night are entirely physical. Remember, this is an unlit, centuries-old ruin. There are no guardrails, it is filled with hidden drop-offs, unstable crumbling walls, and deep dry wells, exactly like the one that tragically killed the boy in our opening story. Trying to navigate all of that in pitch blackness is practically a death wish. But the second and arguably bigger reason is its geography. Bhangarh Fort sits just 50 kilometers from the Sariska Tiger Reserve. And that massive nature reserve? It is crawling with tigers, leopards, and hyenas. These animals frequently wander right into the ruins at night to hunt. So remember those bone-chilling reports of ghostly women screaming in the dark? Well, wildlife experts will tell you that the nocturnal calls of a striped hyena sound exactly like a human woman shrieking. And the eerie rustling sounds of invisible presences? That's just troops of local monkeys moving through the trees. The government ban isn't there to protect you from ghosts. It's literally there to protect you from becoming a leopard's midnight snack.
So, if a dark magician's curse didn't empty out a thriving city of 9,000 people, what actually did? The real answer lies in the year 1783. This was the time of the devastating Chalisa famine. Driven by an extreme El Niño event, a catastrophic drought completely swept across North India. And it's simple. Without water, a city cannot survive. The people of Bhangarh didn't flee a curse. They fled a horrific climate catastrophe. They had to pack up and search for water, leaving their once great city behind to crumble into dust.
So, we know the real history, we know the physics of infrasound, we fully understand the human psychology of suggestibility, and we know about the very real local wildlife. The truth here is simple, it's scientific, and it is historically documented. So why? Why, as a society, do we stubbornly refuse to accept the reality of the drought and instead fiercely protect the legend of the cursed tantric?
Well, it essentially boils down to three reasons. First, human psychology. A random natural drought is chaotic and depressing, but a story with an evil villain and a dramatic curse that provides a deeply satisfying narrative order. Second, economics. The haunted tag is a golden goose. It brings thousands of tourists and their wallets to the area. Dispelling the myth would actually hurt the local economy. And finally, social media. Explaining the physics of wind patterns doesn't get views, but claiming a demonic entity drained your camera battery, that goes instantly viral.
I want to wrap up this explainer with a brilliant thought from Marie Curie. Nothing in life is to be feared, it is only to be understood. Bhangarh Fort really isn't a monument to trapped souls, it's a masterclass in human psychology and the unforgiving power of nature. When we apply science, the monsters in the dark vanish, and they leave behind a reality that is infinitely more fascinating. So it really makes you wonder, what other terrifying monsters in our culture are just sitting there, waiting for someone to finally turn on the lights? Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer.